talk if they want to.
Hi, welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo, and we have a great show in store for you this evening. The New York City Cannabis Parade is coming up next Saturday, May 7th, and we're going to be talking about that and telling people where to go and how to participate in all the different ways. Here's the march on the back. And to talk about it is my guest, returning Noah Potter. Thank you for coming, Noah. It's been a while, but we're glad to have you back. And you are one of the most expert people I know on this issue, medical marijuana and the marijuana movement and legalization and where we go from here in this movement. And so thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Pleasure to be here again.
Great. And, it always means that the smell is in the air. Smell of spring is in the air. The first Saturday of May is always traditionally the cannabis march, because the marijuana march, pot march, smoke-in. It's had many names over the years.
It has had many names, indeed.
Well over 40 years. I think 1972 or 1 or 70. Nobody seems to know exactly when it started.
Yeah, nobody knows. I'm sure Dana Beal is the authoritative personage, but I don't think we've ever actually extracted that particular date. That's another conversation. But
right, exactly when it started.
Long tradition, very long heritage.
And the first Saturday in May. And I remember Dana explaining to me that the first idea was to make it May Day, May 1st. However, that was always the Labor Day or the Communist Protest Day, and so which was a big deal during the Vietnam War era in the early 70s. So they decided that they wanted to have it on a day when it was a Saturday, a general holiday for people when they could just relax and smoke a joint and hear speeches and have a good time and not really worry about all the larger issues of the year, but of the world. However, marijuana has surprisingly, as an issue, grown from a lifestyle issue really to a much bigger deal. I mean, it's like really becoming like a major political issue throughout America, and I don't think I really saw that happening, and it took us by surprise that you would have so many states with medical marijuana, so many states that have legalized it, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar legal business in numerous states. Tell us a little bit about what's happening this Saturday and where this rally here in New York City fits into this whole, panoply of events that are occurring around medical marijuana and marijuana in general.
Yeah, sure. Well, the Saturday is the parade. There's two components to the day. There is a parade, and there is what I'll call a show. We could call it a rally, a speak out, a teach-in, whatever. Depends on how you look at it, in Union Square. Mm-hmm. It's the classic formula. The route of the parade has changed many times over the years. At this point, we're going to be in the third year of assembling at 31st and Broadway, between 31st and 32nd. At 11:30, there will be speakers, and at 12:30, the parade contingents and other participants will head south on Broadway. I expect there will be a van, possibly a motorcycle, some props and costumes, and we're hoping really for real to have people, groups, marching in contingents. The parade will go down Broadway and arrive in the South Plaza of Union Square. We'll have amplified sound there from 1 to 5, and we have numerous speakers, a few different musical acts. The response to our Facebook, on our Facebook page has been, it's overwhelming. There's seems to be a far greater amount of interest in it, and this year we're getting multiple emails a day for people who want to volunteer. I mean, 5 or 10 easily a day leading in. So we're really hoping for a good turnout, assuming we have nice, dry, warm weather. It's a little bit of sunshine, so everybody can put in a good word to your respective heavenly, celestial being or non-being to have the weather come out right. And the bigger context is, well, it's an election year. We just got through a significant meeting at the United Nations, the 3-day UNGAS meeting, which we're discussing.
Right, and we've had a few programs here on that, the United Nations General Assembly Special Session on Drugs, and which is trying to change this entire sort of war on drugs mentality, this just say no mentality, which is sort of hamstrung drug policy throughout the world, really emanating from the United States.
Well, yes, from the United States. My understanding, and I couldn't get too close because I didn't get myself registered to go in. I mean, I know I was on the Facebook feeds and the various news feeds hearing about what was going on. My understanding is that, first of all, and we'll come back to the parade issue and the New York and New York politics and the significance of this particular event on Saturday. But the ungas was called by I believe Uruguay, Mexico, and there might have been a third, Guatemala possibly. Some of the states to the south, shall we say, south of the border, seeking to begin a discussion of drug policy. And just discussing drug policy in and of itself is subversive, right? Because you are asking whether the prohibition is the correct policy in and of itself suggests that there might be an alternative, and that's it's a form of mental lockdown that even to question the policy is problematic. As we were discussing, this is a feature of the Reagan drug war, and there's still in place this attitude towards cannabis that even suggesting or positing there might be a medical use itself undercuts the prohibitionist message. Okay, so I would say that the call to hold a high-level, full General Assembly discussion on the drug policy, just to create the opportunity, the forum, was somewhat subversive. So in reaction, some of the more conservative prohibitionist countries, Russia, China, and I believe Indonesia's in there. I don't know all the full cast of characters.
Thailand, Singapore. There's a number of
the
them.
folks who
the ones that have the death penalty.
The death penalty kind of thing. I think it's probably like the Executioners Union that's opposed to.
Seems that way.
Right, something like that. So so that was it wasn't a huge news splash, but it did crack the media wall, so to speak. But the biggest issue, I think, is we have a confluence of a rapidly growing movement, really. I don't know what to call it, a wave, a tidal wave of sorts.
Tsunami.
Breaking. We call it a tsunami. I mean, there's some other metaphor in there. Hitting the election year. And, the election year really is critical because something is coming in January. There's going to be a new administration of one kind or another. Presumably the cabinet heads are going to change. Could be a number of agency heads changing. So nobody knows what's coming down for the next 4, possibly 8 years. So that's the context of this moment. There's a lot of activism, and New York is experiencing a renaissance of activism that I haven't seen in 20-something years of being, being here and trying to organize and trying to articulate or characterize this issue as being one that's legitimate. The cannabis reform movement has always suffered, I think, from a deficit of credibility or a deficit of legitimacy, in which
we're all a bunch of stoners. We got we're all like Tommy Chong in the TV show, that '70s show. We're always forgetting things.
Right.
We're always failures at everything we do. We're exactly the image that people want to give their children for not ever smoking marijuana. However, we have a situation now where cannabis oil is used to cure or to treat epilepsy in children, and politicians are forcing the governor of the state of New Jersey to try and prevent people from getting a medicine that could do good for them. And that is a contradiction that makes them sort of look foolish, isn't it?
It is, and I'll just to your characterization. I'd say it's a cross. The cannabis user image is a cross between a buffoon and a dangerous derelict. It's one of those two. It's the spectrum. It's either laughing stock or a threat to public health and safety of some kind, and the survival of the republic. But for some example, someone like Christie. I think that the change in the public image is bringing into focus that the ideological distinctions, that there are ideological orientations that underlie attitudes toward drug control policy. And there's a lot more to say about that. Maybe I can circle back to that. But just to bring it back to the parade for a moment, the parade has several functions. I'm a student of Dana Beal. He taught me what I learned, what I know how to do. I learned from him, and then developed it on my own.
The arch marijuana activist of all time.
He's a
He
commando.
invented it.
He's a commando, and he's still going. Nothing can stop him. He's the Wolverine, so to speak.
Yeah, heart attack, surgeries, prison, whatever they throw at this guy, he just keeps on coming.
Keeps getting back up. A number of functions of the event. One is to bring people out into the street to see each other and recognize each other as comrades of sorts, a shared goal. It's about getting out, seeing strength in numbers. It's a recruiting tool because the people, that's how I got involved, is I saw a we-pasted poster back in the days when people advertised events as opposed to Facebook. You know, you'd have to send out your team of people to wheat paste the sides of construction sites. And so I went to go check it out. And so the parade is a recruiting tool to build a movement, and that's the bigger context of this event. The
That's why the interesting speakers. I mean, the speakers list. Maybe go a little bit onto the. You have a speakers list here, and it is changing and developing.
Yeah.
But you have law enforcement against prohibition. We've had Jack Cole here on the show last year. These are actual people who used to enforce the drug laws who are now opponents of the drug laws and proponents of legalization. And they had Jack Cole had amazing stories of how they set up young people to destroy their lives for nothing, just for fun, just to make a career out of it.
Yeah.
And there was no real rhyme or reason to it or any really purpose that would aid law enforcement or public order or anything like that.
Kind of a
it was
bummer.
just screwing people
Yeah.
for the fun of it and to get money out of the government. The New York City Council member, Raphael Espinal.
Espinal, this will be his second year speaking. Yes.
Right. And so we have supporters in the New York, Jumane Williams, another city council member.
He actually informed, unfortunately, he's not going to be joining us. I'm very much hoping that someone.
But he's a supporter. He
is, and I expect we will have a statement from him in support of the event.
Excellent. Empire State Normal, which is National Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws, which has been at this for time immemorial.
Since 1970.
Wow. Students for Sensible Drug Policy, which is the main drug policy reform group on college campuses and high schools across America.
Very energetic, very good group of new recruits.
Drug Policy Alliance, which is we're getting into serious activists here.
A lot of that,
Dana Beal, Aaron Kay, the Pie Man, who's been at this from time immemorial.
The veterans.
And more to be announced. And music, you have Lord Digga and the Kazoo Crew Family Band.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
I gotta say, I'm not the entertainment dean.
But it's always fun. There's always cutting edge entertainment, hip hop, rock, reggae, everything.
And we're expecting to have the 420 musical from Buffalo, a totally new genre we've never had.
Really?
And actually, there's a musical. And I got to say, from what I understand, from what I've seen, the Buffalo activists, there's a vibrant activism scene in Buffalo. I can't say I know them personally, but I know them from afar. They're actually, the great irony is how passive the New York City scene is relative to other areas of the country. I mean, there's something ironic there, and there's something that needs to be understood. Any sociologists out there, anybody want to check this out? This is a fascinating topic of the irony of the passivity of the movement here. There's the Buffalo activists are far more engaged with the city council. The New York activists have barely even begun to engage the local power structure.
I've always, that's been a discussion for a long time, why it is New York City. I mean, you have Boston, 50,000 people, Seattle, 100,000 people, Denver, tens of thousands, Boulder, tens of thousands of people, Madison, Wisconsin, a small city. You could fit it in the Lower East Side, thousands of people every year for their Harvest Fest, big bands, huge area, multiple stages. But, even on a best year, we got a couple of thousand maybe.
Right. No, it's been... And
why is that? Nobody knows for sure.
If I knew,
Alice Torbush, our good friend, used to always say, "So we didn't put up enough posters. We rely on the internet too much." But I think that's some of it, but it's not the entire reason.
Listen, if I knew the answer, there would be 15,000 people at the event. But I don't know the answer, and so there aren't.
Right. I used to say it's parking and coming to the city and paying $18 to go through the tunnel. Makes it very difficult.
I mean, there is that, and one possibility is this is where we actually do encounter the stoner buffoon derelict kind of thing. It's people it's totally cool. Yeah. So there may be
a lot
some
of support
that.
from the sidelines.
Exactly.
But we need people to actually get involved and to put down a joint, pick up a sign for once, and actually participate.
I mean, absolutely. And so this goes back. I mean, there's a number of issues that are wrapped up in this, and let's try to pick out the most salient and important ones. That one, the image of, I was going to say, beyond the buffoon derelict is the passive approach. It's apolitical and disengaged. I mean, there's and to some extent I think to some extent that's true. There is an element. In my assessment, it's a political movement. The legitimacy deficit, I think, comes from an aspect of this cultural and I would say lifestyle choice movement that is self-indulgent. And that's always been, I think, part of the issue is that you have a combination, you have multiple strands of people who come together in support of cannabis law reform. You have people who are very hard edge. They're talking about class struggle and mass incarceration and racial injustice. I mean, the whole hardcore, heavy trip, anti-imperialist, this and that. You have people who are coming in because they're artists, people who come in because they just want to get high. And for them, it's that. Now, those people...
It's a party outside on a beautiful day in the spring.
It's exactly. It's it's sometimes it's the party and it's the party.
And
so
partay.
it's two different parties coming together.
Right.
It's like
the party and the partay.
Right. So that's an awkward alliance, so to speak. Just like presumably every political movement is made up of different elements. So the aspect that generally gets the attention because it's the more photogenic is the people in the costumes and the leaves and the barely there bikinis.
The topless
right,
girls
exactly.
And
right.
That,
We've had our share of that.
Well, they're painted. It's all right.
I know it's somewhat family friendly. But so that's what gets the image. And so the media comes, we've had much better media coverage in the recent years. I mean, we were on the NBC national news site, right? We didn't get it. We didn't get it.
They used to turn the camera around. In the early days, I'd be on the marches when we used to do it on the Halloween, and the Halloween parade would go by, and when the pot contingent came by, the cameras would actually turn 180 degrees and just point their camera another way.
They're not doing that now.
I know.
It's not like that. We had good news coverage from New York One. Last year, New York One interviewed Dana, interviewed a few different people there. It was a full piece. Interviewed Councilmember Espinal after he came down. They interviewed. We're going to have two speakers from the Green Party this year. The one speaker last year was interviewed on New York One. So extensive photo spreads. The Village Voice didn't do an article 2 years ago, but they did an extensive photo montage on their site. So the press coverage is much better. But the point being that they will do interviews of policy people, or they get the man on the street who says, yeah, I think it should be legal. But the image is of the people who are they're flying their counterculture colors, so to speak, and that's what's photogenic. That's what makes a good shot. But it also and I'm not speaking against those people because they're brothers and sisters and comrades, and more the merrier. The point is that the image reinforces and in a sense, reifies the image of people who are just checked out in a daydream. So
it's not exactly how many of the people who would like to come to this event like to see themselves.
There is that, but that is upon the individual. And should there be more people come out and say, enough is enough? The policy ultimately, it never made sense. It never made sense. It doesn't make sense.
It's
and
a serious issue.
It is a serious issue, for
if you
sure.
Read, Michelle Alexander in her book, The New Jim Crow, we see that it's. I would say that Black Lives Matter is not about legalizing marijuana, but when marijuana was a tool that was used to terrorize and harass people of color throughout the city for many decades, and it came to a head with 50,000 people a year being arrested, almost every one of them African American, and for what? For having a $2 worth of pot or $5 worth of pot in their wallet when they were, in my opinion, illegally stopped and searched for walking down the streets, and then this was used against them to harass and to put them in jail. We have to look at this as the serious issue it is.
Well,
it is not just, and we need the party, we need all that, but people have to understand, who are watching this show, and have to understand that this is a key issue. It's not just about getting high. It's not just about a party in the park. That people are suffering. Students, young people who are arrested lose their student loans, lose their student housing. People get thrown out of the public housing for marijuana, for a small amount of marijuana, for selling a nickel bag, for selling a bag of pot. They're thrown out of their homes. Whole Whole families are thrown out of their homes. Stores are shut down because somebody smoked a joint in front of them. I mean, people's lives are really impacted and ruined in some ways by these laws. So they have a serious, serious impact, and they're obviously part of this sort of, racial injustice that goes on in this country for far too long, and it's continuing to go on whether we have a black president or not. And I have to say, I have to thank the mayor, because let's talk about police.
Well, I will talk about,
what's our relationship this year with the police?
Let me say a couple things. First of all, I take all your points in terms of the seriousness of the issue. There's a lot to say about that, and it goes to the credibility, the legitimacy deficit, in which cannabis is presented either as the assassin of youth, or the supporters of cannabis are deemed to be frivolous, self-indulgent buffoons yet again. But that in the context of the larger issue of drug control, because once you pull the camera back from that and you look at opioids and coke and meth and other stimulants, for example, then the narrative changes completely, and then it's nightmare, and these are big problems, but they're all linked. And so to separate out the cannabis issue as being illegitimate, and the other issues as being the real serious issues. And I say that's for movement people as well, that's for progressives as well, who disdain the cannabis issue because they think of it as a frivolous, ne'er-do-well issue.
But how about the other side, the cannabis people who say, oh, we have the superior drug, nobody's ever died from smoking a joint. We have the drug that's not really a drug, it's an herb. We shouldn't be in the same category even as methadone, heroin, cocaine, and the rest of these things.
Well, yeah, that's a problem.
It's not even a drug. It's a food. It's a vitamin.
These are actually very complicated, I would say, policy and legal issues. I mean, there's a full panel discussion to be had on these, in no doubt. But I will agree with you. This has classically been a problem for the movement, and I saw this with Dana in the 90s when he was trying to move Ibogaine along, and the cannabis people said, leave us alone. Ibogaine, junkies,
a cure for junk, a cure for heroin addiction.
I'm not interested. And that's actually, I'm going to talk about the police. I'm going to talk about the legislation.
They like us this year. The days of the Giuliani administration when 300 and 400 people were arrested for marching down the street, it hasn't been like that in years now.
It's nothing
and
like that.
And last year, I'm not going to advise anybody to do this, but I was surprised. I smelled and saw a lot of marijuana, and I saw officers just walking by like they didn't see anything. I'm not sure that's going to happen this time, but it was interesting.
You can't say that's necessarily the case. But let me talk about, I guess, two different things. Make sure that we touch on one. There's what's going to happen on the day of the event. There's our interactions with the New York City Police Department, and then there's the bigger picture, the political goals of this event. And again, the idea being to bring people out in the streets and then channel that towards political objectives. Those primarily, for our purposes, being movement in the legislature on the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, which is, and most people are not aware of this, that there is actually pending in Albany for it's got to be the second year, a full adult legalization cannabis. It's a prospective cannabis statute analogous to Colorado.
Kruger,
Senator Kruger, and Crystal Peoples-Stokes in the Assembly from Buffalo. I mean, people are not aware that it could move. There is no obstacle to movement forwards towards full legalization in New York, except the citizens and voters of the state.
Now, why? Let's say I thought we had medical marijuana, and I'm saying that facetiously a little bit to be devil's advocate, because I just wrote an article. It's on the front page of the Villager newspaper, the East Village Express, right now, and where we had Dennis Levy, who's been on this show, and folks from the Columbia Care, the medical marijuana dispensary near Union Square, right? And Dennis was saying, it's like a jail. It's like going into jail to buy $300 little eyedropper full of marijuana when states like Colorado have made $1 billion in sales, donated millions of dollars to the tax base, of which millions, even more, millions went to school construction.
Yeah.
So, actually marijuana smokers are financing the construction of schools in the state of Colorado, state of Washington, state of Alaska, state of Oregon, and we see it's virtually legal in California with the medical marijuana. There's very loose. Their regulations allow for widespread use of marijuana under the medical marijuana statutes, and they're going to fully legalize, according to the polls anyway, this November. We have Massachusetts, Vermont, Washington, D.C., where it's legal, legal. We have even southern states, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, seriously considering medical marijuana laws much looser than what we have in New York. What's going on in New York? I mean, you can't walk down a street, law or no law, without smoke. Yeah. Every day I go walk through clouds of marijuana smoke. It's the most marijuana-friendly city in the world almost, and yet we have to pay $300. We can't get a sick person, a person who's dying, an opportunity to smoke something that'll make them feel better. What's going on in the state?
Well, good question. You're talking about the Compassionate Care Act.
Yes.
It was passed in 2014 after 17-year struggle on the part of Assemblymember Gottfried of the Upper West Side. And I mean, one of the things that I do is I blog.
Who's been on the show as well?
Okay, well, he's the man. He is the godfather of cannabis law reform, going back to the late 70s. He was the architect of the decriminalization statute, which is at issue in the police tactic of the 50,000 arrests, was directly contrary to the intention of that law, is my understanding. So one of the things I do is I blog at New Amsterdam Psychedelic Law, psychedeliclaw.com, and even though it's
Say that again.
New Amsterdam Psychedelic Law.com. No, sorry. It's the blog. The blog is New Amsterdam Psychedelic Law. The URL is psychedeliclaw.com. This is my focus, my life focus is
Noah Potter. You can so you can learn more about Noah and what his work is, which is he's been a long time advocate. We've known each other 20 years almost.
20 plus.
Yes, and he's been working hard on this issue and is really a stalwart. And you should get congratulations from folks for the good work he's done and he's doing to keep this thing alive. When Dana was in jail and we didn't know what to do, it was Noah who stepped forward and took hold of this, took the bull by the horns and made it happen.
I tried. So it's always been a team effort. But thank you for that. So the point being on the cannabis issue is I traced the evolution of that statute. I mean, I started blogging in 2010, and I started following the evolution of the legislation. And basically, Cuomo came in at the last minute, made a lot of it was really, really diabolical and atrocious conduct. And I got to say it outright. I mean, it's an atrocity. It's a
We're down to the last couple of minutes, so like.
Okay. All right. Well, a couple things to hit. We're going to talk about that. We're going to just talk a little bit about the MRTA and the situation.
So the MRTA, the law you're talking about, which is doesn't have traction right now, but we're hoping maybe after California legalizes, we'll pick up some support. Would actually just legalize marijuana in New York for adults.
You would have
and tax it.
Let me give you the simplest version because it's a long piece of legislation. Yeah. It is a law that would treat cannabis like alcohol. In fact, it places regulatory authority it changes the alcohol control. The state liquor authority to the liquor and cannabis authority. Right. It is the
okay, so we're running out of time. So this is great. A great law. Learn more about it. We're going to be talking more about it. So this is the event. The Cannabis Parade, and it's going to start at 31st Street and Broadway. And then they're going to march after some speeches. That's at high noon on the 7th, the New York City Cannabis Parade, and then this coming Saturday. And then they're going to march down to Union Square till 5 p.m. where there'll be music and entertainment and speeches, and we'll learn more and get to interact with each other. And all these different factions that are involved in marijuana and drug reform will get to interact and get to know each other. And so there'll be everything. And thank you very much, Noah, for coming up. And I don't know how exactly. We have a few seconds left, so why don't you can go take it from there and tell us a little bit more about where does this go from here after the rally?
Well, that's exactly the question. Where it goes afterwards is to build for 2017. It's to take we're going to be having meetings. The goal is to have meetings immediately after this event to begin doing two things. Pointing people towards their city council members, their community boards, and ultimately their state senators and assembly members to demand that the committees in which the MRTA has been introduced hold hearings, vote on the bill, and send it out to the full House of both the Assembly and the Senate for a vote.
Thank you very much, Noah Potter.
Pleasure. Thank you.